All right, Matt, welcome to the studio. How you doing today?
I am good. How are you?
Not bad. Just
Excellent.
I'm kind of like we're deep in holiday mode now, right? It's like we've had
I
Thanksgiving.
know. And it's finally starting to feel like the holidays in Los Angeles. It's always weird to me because it doesn't really hit till like beginning of December, if that,
Yeah.
So
Well, once it starts getting dark at like 4 p.m., you've lost me.
see, I love that. Everyone thinks I'm crazy, but I love that.
What about those sunsets on the ocean at like 8:30 p.m. in the summertime? Those are lovely.
Yeah, but you know what? You never get to the ocean if you live here anyway. So it doesn't matter. I mean, I think I get there once a year, and it's usually if someone's in town visiting me.
Right. It's on the wrong side of the 405.
Exactly. Exactly.
Every time I have a podcast guest who comes from the west side of the 405, they always sit down and be like, "Oh, man, it was really tough getting over the 405."
Yeah, I mean, it's for like the West Side to me. If you work over there, if your whole life is over there, that's why you live there.
Mhm.
Like I ventured over there yesterday actually for an event, and I was like, "This is a trek. This is a long way to go." But
You try.
I tried.
I can't I think I've lived in LA now for 12 months. I think I arrived last November, and I haven't been to Santa Monica or Venice or any I
Oh,
but
really?
yeah. I mean, I've been there many times over the years. I've been coming to
Right,
LA for, like, more than 20 years for work and stuff,
right,
but never to live. I've only just come for, like, a week at a time.
right.
But now, like, now that I've actually lived here, I don't know enough people to go that way, and I haven't been invited to do anything or go to any events over there, or if I have, I just don't go. But yeah,
Right.
but yeah, this little pocket is definitely home.
I think that's very true of LA, and I think that's true of most cities.
Mhm.
It's like, you go to New York and if like I was there last Christmas, like Christmas and past New Year's, and like friends who lived in like Brooklyn didn't want to come into like Hell's Kitchen.
Yeah.
It's like no, we can't go in there. Do you know where you are? Like you're so far away from us, and I'm just like, okay, I get it. Everyone's territorial. I think in every city they live in. So
But the metro, the subway makes everything a lot easier in New York, right? Because 'cause you're not dealing with surface traffic. Like in
right,
LA, it's just this 3-lane road that goes out to the ocean and
exactly.
yeah.
Well, I mean, I think there's parts of LA, like West Hollywood and like Santa Monica and stuff like that, that's more walkable. Like you can walk to grocery stores and places like that. So there are some neighborhoods, but yeah, for the most part, you're in your cars. Yeah. And you know what someone told me
Forever.
the other day? And
Yeah.
exactly. You know what someone told me the other day that Santa Monica Boulevard, this might be a little too inside for people who don't live here, but if you go by like Century City, that mall,
Mhm.
and it kind of widens up as you go past it. I guess they had planned to build a freeway
Mhm.
and had started it and stopped it, and that's why it, like, widens like that.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
They almost had it.
They almost had it for, like, 2 seconds, and they're like, "No."
I tell you, every time I take Laurel Canyon and go north, like, because you just go along Sunset, make a left over Laurel Canyon to get to,
Right,
like, Burbank, Studio City, whatever.
right.
Every time I do that, I was like, "Man, if this was China, because I lived in China for 18 years.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so I was like, "Man, if this was China, there would be, like, a high-speed tunnel right under this mountain," right? Yeah. It's like all the people who live in Laurel Canyon can take the road.
Right.
Yeah, but the people who wanna go through Laurel Canyon to get to the other side to do fucking work, they have a tunnel, right? Like, that's
That yeah,
yeah.
yeah, I
I
mean
infrastructure, basic infrastructure.
well, they wanted to in LA. I read somewhere, like, a long time ago, they wanted to in, like, the '50s, in, like, the middle of, like, the 101 and stuff like that, put, like, public transportation, like, put trains in the middle, like a subway system within the middle of the freeway, and everyone was like, "No, no, no, that's like New York, that's like Chicago, like, we're LA, we don't need that," because, like, in the '50s, it wasn't,
Any traffic?
and 50,000 million people here, so
I wonder with what we know now about lobbyists and the way Washington, D.C. really works, I'm really wondering, like, how powerful the car companies were in the '50s and '60s to stop
oh, I'm sure.
public transportation
Yeah.
infrastructure development in that time. They're like, "Oh, no, don't put in a train. Make people buy cars."
I'm sure that's what it was, absolutely.
It had to be, right?
Yeah, that city would have been this city would have been so different,
Yeah.
and they're trying to do it now, they're trying to, to build all these, this whole subway line around Los Angeles, but I don't know, I think it's like a whole generation's gonna have to, like, get used to that because no one I know is taking the subway, And the people I know that are taking the subway are driving to the subway to take it because it's cool to take the subway. So it's just
It's not worth.
not worth it. It's not worth it. But I appreciate the intention. So
I lived in Switzerland also for a little bit, and it's funny. Like I believe like Switzerland is basically the size of like LA County or something like
mhm.
that. But in Switzerland, you never drive. They've got an amazing train system. It goes from the city center of every city to the city center of every other city, right? So
Right.
when you get off the train, you're right in the part of the town where you need to be to go to your meetings and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And then even if you have to go a little further out, every city has a tram above ground. There's no reason to drive unless you're super rich and you just want to drive your
Yeah.
Lamborghini.
Look, I would love not drive.
Hmm.
Um, it would be fantastic. I would love it. If I could just walk and take the train everywhere, that would be perfect. But fortunately, LA is not built like that. So
My great fix was to have a podcast and make people come to me.
that's perfect. It's perfect.
So look, today's all about you, man. We've been connected for quite a while. We've never met.
You ever met?
And I would just love to hear your story, and you can throw back any questions you like, and we can get started.
Okay, perfect.
So, where are you from originally?
Originally, born and raised just outside of Chicago, in a town called Wilmette, and along the North Shore, and it's famous for many things, but it's Wilmette, Winnetka, Glencoe, and all these communities nearby. It's where John Hughes based all of his movies.
Mm.
So he went to high school, same high school I did, like a million years before me, but it's where he got the ideas for like Breakfast Club and Pretty in Pink and all those John Hughes movies. So it's a very, idyllic Midwestern,
Mhm.
everything's green and, it was a very nice place to grow up.
Well, Illinois is such a beautiful state. Like
It
if you
is.
if you drive, like Chicago is obviously the big city, and it's an urban jungle, high rises, but it's not that big. It's quite small, and once you kind of get out of Chicago, it's just like beautiful suburbs in every direction.
Yeah.
Every tree, every like suburban road is tree lined, and all the
Yeah.
houses are. It does make you feel like almost like you're in a John Hughes movie.
It's true. And, when I go back and visit, I'm always just struck by it because, um, a lot of Southern California isn't green as we would like, or as green as it used to be.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's breathtaking. So, yeah, so I grew up there. I mean, my dad, worked in advertising, in Chicago. My mom was a stay-at-home mom, until I think I was maybe 8, and then she had some part-time jobs, and then she started, like, her own party planning/wedding slash wedding consultant business, which did really well.
Oh,
So,
that's great.
yeah,
And you're growing up like a stone's throw from Chicago. So
right.
like how much of your, youth was full of angst of like going into the big city?
Well, it's funny, when my grandparents lived there, like, my father worked there, so we would go in on the weekends, but it always felt so far away, and it was only maybe 17 minutes, but that felt like, 6 hours.
Right.
But I had to, like, I was such a suburban kid, that I was like, there was a point in my life where I was like, "I don't wanna go to the city. It's, like, it's dirty, it's dangerous, blah, blah, blah." And then I think once I got into high school and I would, my friends and I would take, like, the train down there, and then I realized, "Oh my gosh, city living is for me,
Yeah.
for the most part."
It is, right?
Yeah.
It can be quite addictive. Like I kind of grew up in the suburbs around Toronto, Canada, and
Mhm.
it was the same thing. Like I played basketball when I was a kid, and the best basketball teams at that time were like all in the inner city,
Right.
and I like wanted to be in the city to play against the best players and all this kind of stuff. So eventually we ended up like moving into the actual city. But then that's where all the energy is. Like there's something that attracts like young people to the
Yeah,
city for sure.
absolutely. I think that's what keeps cities going, I think,
Yeah.
without young people coming in, I don't think they would thrive, but Toronto's a great city, like, I've been there, it's like a cleaner, prettier New York
Yeah,
in some respects.
it has its ups and downs. I mean,
Right.
it's definitely like I think it's a great place to live.
Right.
And it was definitely a great place to grow up. But I don't know. Canada is just a little strange in a few different ways.
Okay.
But I say that just finishing like my first year in the United States, going through an election year, which was fucked up.
Yeah, going through, the most biggest election of our lifetimes, but and with everyone wanting to move to Canada, not everyone, but a lot of people wanting to move to Canada now, so
I think that okay, like I said, Canada was a great place to grow up, nothing against Canada, but it doesn't quite have the dynamicism of like a New York or an LA, right? So
yeah.
if there's any famous people out there who don't like the results of the recent election, who are gonna think they're gonna move to Vancouver or Toronto, I give them less than 12 months because although it's just, Toronto and Vancouver, they feel very suburban,
Right.
but, but it just doesn't have that energy that New York has, and obviously, you don't have the people to meet and hang out with that you have in LA, which is why we're all here.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly, and I think it's also I think they're making it they realize that everyone wants to move there, so I think, Canada's making it a little harder for us to want to relocate, but
And keeping those taxes nice and high.
exactly, of course. Well, California and New York, I mean,
It's all the
it's
same.
all the same, yeah.
Yeah, except you get free healthcare.
Yeah. That is the plus. That is the plus.
But okay, so you're what, like, you're a teenager in Chicago, and are you interested in television, film, acting?
Absolutely.
What was the catch?
It was probably both, like, I mean, I grew up watching way too much television, like, way too much television, like, if I had kids, they would not have watched that much television because I mean, I was just plopped in front of a TV
That
and,
was the babysitter.
yeah, exactly,
Yeah.
exactly, and I watched everything, and I mean, I was the youngest. I had, um, 5 older siblings. We didn't all they were from 2 different marriages, but I was still the youngest of my siblings by, like, 8 years. So by the time my parents got to me, they were like, "Alright, we give up." So they would just pop me in front of the TV. I would watch what I would watch. I would watch what they were watching. Like, if they wanted to go to a movie at, like, 9 o'clock on a Saturday night, an R-rated movie, they'd take me. So it was, yeah, so TV was a big part of my life, and I always wanted to, be in it, and I wanted to be on it.
Mhm.
That was my dream, so, yeah.
That's very funny actually, because I had a similar experience. Maybe not with watching too much TV, but definitely my parents dad maybe specifically is guilty of this. Like, I think I watched every Arnold Schwarzenegger and Sylvester Stallone action movie when I was like 6, 7, 8, 9, like way too young to watch people's heads exploding and Rambo and all this shit.
Yeah.
And that was just like normal.
Yeah, no, my dad was into Westerns. 'Cause he had this dream of being a cowboy in another life, and so, like, we would go to these, like, Clint Eastwood movies. There was Westerns and, like, Clint Eastwood movies and, like, just anything violent, I would be dragged to. So, but yeah, that's what I wanted to do. I was like, "I wanna be an actor, I wanna be on TV." So, I did, like, plays and, like, starting in, like, I don't know, grade school and, like, junior high. And then in high school, yeah, and I was fortunate enough that the high school I went to had a really good, for a high school, had a really great, a theater program. So, I did a lot. I did a lot of theater in high school. I wrote like a senior like review. So it was a great place to, great high school to, be like an actor or an artist in for sure.
Well, that's great. I mean, it's great that you had that kind of support network around to actually facilitate, those desires to perform, right? Like, because
Yeah.
so many schools don't have drama or music programs. It's crazy.
Yeah, no, it's nuts. And this was, I mean, the high school I went to is called New Trier High School. And, it's got, like, this alumni that includes, like, Anne Margaret, Rock Hudson, Bruce Dern, like, all these famous actors, so it spawned all these people, and I think that's probably where, uh, a lot of the the money came, to put it into this program, which was, a great and still is, like, a great high school and a great theater program.
Yeah. So you're in high school. You're just in the suburbs of Chicago.
Yep.
Like, are you thinking like, how do I do this professionally at this stage, or are you just like,
Always,
yeah?
always.
So you had the wherewithal to figure out like this could be a business.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, my parents were encouraging. My mom was encouraging, I think, because it's like, "Oh, my son's gonna be an actor. She's gonna be on TV." No one really knew the business side of it.
No one does.
No one does. Like, your parents don't know.
Even
Um
half the people in LA don't know.
exactly, exactly. And, like, I would s like, my I say to people now, like, I was talking to someone, like, a few weeks ago who's moving to LA, who just, like, graduated from college, and I said, "Your parents are great," and I know their parents. "Your parents are great, they're amazing. Don't take career advice from them when it comes to, like, the entertainment business, because unless they're, like, Dustin Hoffman or whoever. It's like because it's challenging business, and my parents didn't know that, I mean, they lived in, the suburb of Chicago. They knew what everyone else knew about the business. "Oh, yeah, it's hard," but no one knew, like, how hard it is, you know?
At least they didn't shut you down because of how hard they might have assumed it to be. Like, at least they kinda still fed your dreams. That was kinda sweet of them. Like, and 'cause, like, I think children can be hit with too much of a dose of reality
Right.
at an early stage, right?
Right.
Yeah.
No, I mean, that was great, and I think, my mom especially, like, she grew up going to the movies and, like, watching TV, and she loved everything entertainment, like, her and her best friend would sit around and they would, gossip about what's going on in Hollywood, and I would sit with her probably watching, things that I shouldn't be watching, like miniseries and just all this stuff with, like, mature content. So, yeah, so it definitely, they were definitely encouraging in that respect.
Yeah. I was just listening to, Billy Bob Thornton. He was doing a lot of press the last couple weeks for his new show, Landman, on Paramount
Mhm.
Plus. Not a sponsor, but for some reason I keep talking. I love Billy Bob Thornton.
Yeah, he's
Like,
amazing.
since Sling Blade, he's got me. But he was saying, like, how, like, 20, 30 years ago, television was just so bad because, the stories were entertaining, but it was such a huge leap from TV to film
Right.
because of the censorship. Like, you couldn't swear, you couldn't have, romantic scenes or nudity or anything like that. And Billy Bob was saying, like, but now, like, because of streaming, you don't have the same censorship
Right.
rules because you're not on, like, broadcast TV,
Right.
linear TV. And now, like, TV is better than movies because instead of having 90 minutes to build a character, you've got 10 episodes, you've got
Yeah.
10 hours to find the rhythm of your character and to give you that chance to really develop it and hone it over the course of those 10 episodes. And he was just absolutely praising streaming for raising the level of television. So it's funny, like, some people hate it, some people don't, but clearly you have this, like, huge evolution of film actors going into television where they can really, like, work longer.
Right.
It's amazing how, like, everything's kind of flipped on its head.
Yeah, and I think there was a time when, film actors, if they did television, were looked down upon.
Mhm.
It's like I'm finding more I like more shows, like more like, mainly streaming shows. I don't really watch anything on, like, broadcast TV, but
Mm.
I like more streaming shows than I do movies,
Mhm.
and I probably see more streaming shows than I do movies.
Mhm.
But it's definitely yeah, we're kind of in the golden age in terms of, like, content, in terms of, like, what's coming out there because, like, I can't keep up with all the shows that people recommend to me, and
And we're in the
what good
industry.
stuff out there. Yeah, I know. Yeah. Like, every day someone is saying to me, "Did you watch this? You should watch this. You should watch this." And I'm like, "I can't watch everything." I'm like, "I have to pick and choose."
Yeah. It's tough. You know who was the actor that broke that, stigma between, film actors and television actors?
I do not.
There's a story to it. So I only know it because he's Canadian, Kiefer Sutherland.
Okay.
And of course, we just lost Donald Sutherland a couple of months ago, I think, or literally
Ordinary
yeah.
People, one of my favorite movies.
But Kiefer Sutherland was offered, 24, the television
Right.
series where he has 24 hours to solve, some international terrorism plot, and it actions in real time. So one season is 24 episodes. Each episode is an hour of real time, real action. But when he was first offered that, he was like, "Fuck this! I'm a fucking film actor.
Right.
Like, what am I gonna do?" Right? And then, and then he took the job, and they made like 200 episodes or something like that. He ended up making hundreds of millions of
Yeah,
dollars in royalties.
exactly.
And then that changed everything. It's like, "Oh my god, you can make real money in television like that?" Of course, like, Ted Danson and all these people have known that for years,
Yeah.
but all
I
these
mean,
yeah.
Ted Danson I mean, that man keeps going and going I mean, it's incredible. But it's funny, it sort of reminds me, I was reading something about John Hamm,
Yeah.
about Mad Men and how, he said, he goes, today he wouldn't have gotten that role,
Mhm.
but back then AMC was new and, it was kind of like an experiment. And so like, and he took off because of that role. But today they would have gotten like, some film actor and put him in that role and not like some guy who had just done like TV.
Or maybe it would have been too sexist to even make today because the whole gender roles and male-female stereotypes were pretty heavily played out in that. Now,
Yeah.
you think it could have gotten off the ground today?
I think it could.
Yeah.
I mean, that's one of my favorite shows of all time. So I hate to think that it would not be made.
My favorite movie of all time that could absolutely not be made today is Tropic Thunder,
Oh,
by Ben Stiller.
right. That could not be made today. No,
No.
no. Every day something comes out or there's some clip of something on social media, and I'm always like, nope, that could be made today. Could not happen today.
No.
Not gonna happen. So
Never happened. Too bad though. But have you noticed now they put, and this is a huge aside, but let's keep going on here. I'll bring us back at some stage. I was watching a television show I was watching a movie on YouTube the other day. I think it was YouTube, and it was an old movie, and I had to like pay $3.99 or something to
Of
rent it for 24 hours or whatever it was. But I really wanted to watch this movie because it was connected to something else that was already in my brain. And there was a disclaimer on the front of the movie where it's like, this movie hasn't been edited, but it may trigger people because it was made at a time before like today's sensible values have been. And I was like, don't do that to this movie. Like,
Yeah.
just put like this movie was made in 1976
Well, I
and
think
it
people
represents.
figure it out by looking at the movie and realizing this wasn't made, in 1 in 24. Yeah. So
Yeah,
yeah, it's interesting.
yeah, we're in a very strange kind of crossroads. But I digress. You are 18 years old.
18 years old.
You're graduating from high school in Chicago.
Okay. Yeah. 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 Okay. I'm there.
Where were you at 18? But like you're a theater student, you graduate high school, and then it's like what? Do you go to college? Do you try for New York? Do you go straight to LA? What's the plan?
Well, I went to college. I was always going to go to college. And so I ended up going to University of Texas at Austin and majoring in acting.
Hmm.
Um, and then kind of like midway through my junior year, I just had a moment where I was like, I don't want to be an actor anymore.
Hmm.
And I think I realized that we were doing some exercise I was in a movement class. We were doing some exercise where we were lying on the floor. This is so theater. And we had to we had to close our eyes and visualize that we're on a beach. We're walking on a beach with someone we love, and it's the most amazing day ever. And then, cut to that person is dead.
Hmm.
Um, and it was supposed to, elicit this emotion and get us in touch with ourselves. And I don't know, for some reason I was lying there and I was like, I respect actors, I'm friends with actors, but this isn't what I want to do for a living. It just struck me as not me. So I ended up getting an acting degree
Hmm.
because I didn't want to go to college for 10 years. And so and I got the degree and I was like, okay, what do I do now? Because I really had no idea. I knew I wanted to do something entertainment wise, but I had no idea what that was.
That's wild though that you went to like a 4-year acting college degree, University of Texas Austin, and then midway through you like outgrew acting.
Yeah, I did. I think what it was, I know what it was. It was the fact that I had so much fun in high school. I had fun doing plays. I had fun at the cast parties. It was like a party all the time. And I think once, and it, it took me like 2.5 years, but once I got, came to this realization, I was like, well, wait a minute, this isn't going to be a party all the time. This is gonna suck.
There's going to be some tears.
Yeah, there's gonna be a lot of tears. So, which I'm grateful to, because look, and I also knew, I didn't have the hunger for it. And that's the thing. If you're an actor, if you're like any artist, but especially if you're an actor, you have to be hungry. You have to really, really want it. You have to live and breathe it. And I have friends who do that, who are actors, who are just they're constantly, working, either it's, paid or not paid. I just didn't have that when it came to acting. So in some respects, I'm grateful that I learned that at 20, as opposed to 35.
Hmm.
But yeah, it was definitely a realization. And so, yeah, so I graduated and I was like, okay, now what do I do? So I moved back to Chicago
Hmm.
and I started waiting tables,
Hmm.
and trying to figure out what was going on. And one of my sisters at the time lived in Seattle, and she was like an assistant at a radio station up there. And we went to visit her, and I was like, "Oh, this is fun." I'm working at a radio station. So came back to Chicago and just started reaching out to all the local radio stations in Chicago. Ended up getting an internship with WGN Radio, which is at the time was the number one radio station in Chicago. And they just picked me at random.
Hmm.
And so was an intern there and then became a part-time producer. I produced everything. I started out doing a Sunday night business slash jazz show.
Mhm.
So from like 10:30 to midnight, it was business, and then from 12 to 2 a.m., it was jazz music.
Wow.
Um,
It's a very interesting split.
it was an interesting split,
Oh, yeah.
but it taught me a lot about, about the business of radio and everything like that. And that led to producing a midday talk show, which is called the Kathy and Judy Show, for everyone in Chicago who was there in like the 90s and 2000s. So that was it was probably some of the most fun I've ever had at any job.
Mhm.
It was two women, and it's basically like a 2.5 hour like midday show where they just talked and interviewed guests, and I was able to like write like sketches for them, and it was great. It was like a great experience, and I thought, all right, I'm like, this is going really well. I'm like, I don't care about acting. I'm fine. I'm loving this. Um, but always in the back of my head, like always, 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 was LA,
Mhm.
you know? And I was like, I have to move to LA. It was like, it was building and building and building. And then one day I was like at the post office, standing in line at the post office, and I was like, I need to move to LA. And a month later, I was gone. Like,
Wow.
yeah, I went in, I gave notice, and also I was having this, like, quarter life crisis. I'm like, I'm turning, like, 26, I'm like, my life is over,
I'm so close to 30.
so close to 30, it's gonna be it's gonna suck if I don't move to LA. So I packed up, like, my car and with my stuff and drove out here by myself.
Mhm.
I knew, like, 6 people, 5 of whom no longer live here.
Mhm.
And it was, I've it was I mean, I'm still amazed that I did it because, I had a really nice job.
Mhm.
And even some people at the radio station I worked at were like, "What are you doing?
Mhm.
Like, why would you move to LA? Like, why would you do this?" And, looking back, and I think, "Why would you tell a 26-year-old that?" I'm like,
Yeah.
let them do what they want.
It's the best time to make mistakes.
Yeah, exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. Like, it's just like now or never, for the most part.
It's funny how, like it's funny, like, when you're young, I think, and you find, like, a decent job or, like, a good job,
Right.
and you're like, "Wow, this is, like, as good as it's gonna get. Like, I gotta really,
Yeah.
lock this down." And then you almost, like, put yourself in golden handcuffs, right?
Yeah.
It's like, "Ooh, I'm making more money than all my friends, and I'm doing pretty well, and wow, I could, like, buy a house, like, soon
Yeah.
and all this kinda stuff." And then it's like, then there should be another part of you that says, like, "Wow, if I buy a house and, like, keep this job, like, this is gonna be me for the next, like, 30 years. Like, there's no getting out of it."
Right.
And then any other dream or goal you have is completely out the window.
Yeah, and I think, as artists, as actors, producers, writers, we're just wired differently,
Mhm.
and I think we have this longing, at least I did, where I was just like, "You know what? I need to try this." I'm like, "I can always come back to Chicago. I can always do something else. I can always get a job at a radio station." In fact, when I was driving out, I stopped and stayed with some friends in Denver for a little bit, and one of them, uh, somehow sent my resume to a radio station there because they wanted me to move to Denver, and
They did that without telling you?
telling me, and they offered me a job, and I was like, No." I'm like, I know I need to do this." I'm like, I didn't quit my job in Chicago to come to Denver and do the same thing."
I'm only halfway to LA.
Exactly. I'm like, "What are you doing to me?" So, yeah, so I got here. I knew, like I said, like 6 people, and I had like a list of, like, names.
Mhm.
So people were giving me, like, "I know this person and my brother's cousin," like, I just had a list of people, and I reached out to every single one of them. And for the first, like, 4 months, I think I temped, funny, I temped for, like, I think it was either Equifax or TransUnion, one of those credit agencies.
Mhm.
And they they offered me a job too. But I was like, "No, I'm good, I'm good." And I ended up getting a job, writing and producing, like, television promotional campaigns.
Mhm.
Randomly, the man who owned the company one of the men who owned the company, grew up on my street, like,
In Chicago.
in Chicago, but 20 years before me. So when he saw my resume, he's like, "Wait a minute, I grew up, like, a block from you."
Mhm.
He goes, "But, 20 years before you did." So, I always say, it's sometimes it's who you know, a lot of times it's who you know.
And
Uh,
where you grew up.
yeah, exactly, where you go.
So, okay, back a little bit here. I'm very interested in this transition because I get a chance to talk to a lot of people who start out acting and then transition to something else,
Right.
and I'm very fascinated that you got tired or fed up or you outgrew acting at Texas Austin, and then somehow, like, you figured out, "Wow, like, I'm actually a fucking great producer." Like, I'm wondering if you recognized early on that left brain, right brain, like, emotion versus analytical. Because to be a producer, you have to be, like to be honest, if you wanna be a producer in this world, you need OCD.
Right.
Like, you have to be fucking super on it all the time. You have to be able to problem solve. You have to be able to keep a
Yep.
schedule. You have to take people who don't like schedules and keep them on your schedule.
Right.
It's a nightmare.
Right.
It's a completely different skill set than acting.
Right.
So it's like, did you know that maybe, like, you could maybe be a producer or be, like, a manager of people instead of acting? Did you ever have that inclination, like, I feel like I need to manage, like, large groups of people?
Never. Never. I mean, I honestly, like, I think when I, like, sent my resume to the radio station, to WGN, I didn't know what that would entail.
Yeah.
Like, I didn't know what the job would be. It looked like fun.
Yeah.
That was the thing. So I didn't know what a producer did at a radio station. I had no idea.
Did you ever have the desire to, like, be on air? Like, to be
I
like a
did.
yeah.
There was, like, a brief moment where I was like, "Oh, I could, do the Gen X radio show here," or something like that.
'Cause we're probably the same age, like, Howard Stern took over when we were young, right?
Right.
Do you remember how huge Howard Stern was
Yeah.
in, like, when we were probably, like, 20-ish?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
he took over every local radio station, and he was everywhere.
Yeah, it was
Yeah.
like morning you couldn't go in a city without listening to him, like morning drive.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, that was very brave that I wanted to be on air, but, yeah, what I liked about producing, yeah, all the organizational stuff and, like, booking guests and, and everything like that, but, I could also be creative,
Mhm.
and it was definitely a creative outlet, and it was like, sometimes I would be on air, and that was fun too, but, yeah, I mean, it was never like yeah, I never thought to myself, "Oh my gosh, I wanna be a producer." It just never crossed my mind because again, I didn't know what that was. I just knew I wanted to be in a creative field.
Yeah. Well, Jerry Bruckheimer looks like he's having a lot of fun, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's
I
not
mean,
bad either,
how many other producers can you mention by name?
right? Brian Glazer,
Yeah.
yeah.
Oh, I just watched Parenthood last night, actually, which was, produced by, Brian Glazer
The
and
movie or
directed
the
by Ron Howard. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, Parenthood, the movie, yeah.
the movie's great, yeah.
I've been on this, like, huge Steve Martin kick the last couple months because I started watching Only Murders in the Building, and then I started just going back, like,
Right.
and just watching old Steve Martin movies because I absolutely love him, like Three Amigos,
LA
LA Story.
LA Story is brilliant, especially in, like, living in LA now. Like, you have these LA Story moments, you're like, "Oh my god,
Yeah,
that just happened to me."
where you go into the ATM and you just hand your money off to some guy holding a knife.
My favorite is when he goes to visit his friend and he literally gets in his car and drives like 3 houses down and gets out. Like, that to me is Los Angeles. I
Absolutely.
have friends who do that. Yeah.
Okay, so you're driving to LA,
Mhm.
and are you like, "I'm gonna also be a radio producer in LA," or
Yeah.
what was the like, or do you was like, "I wanna do something totally different."
I wanted to, write for sitcoms.
Okay, so now writing enters
Now
play.
writing yeah, here's writing. And I had done a little writing in high school when I wrote this, like, musical and everything like that, so
Yeah.
I wanted to do that, and, that was my goal, was,
Mhm.
like, to be a sitcom writer. And so I had written, I think, a couple of, like, spec scripts, think of, like, Frasier, I think, was one of them, and I had those, with me, and so my dream was I'm gonna go out to LA, and I'm gonna, be staffed on a sitcom, and I'm gonna make, tons and tons of money, and I'm gonna buy a house in the hills and all that stuff.
Mhm.
And so, I got out here, and it was, again, it was challenging. And I met with a whole bunch of people. I met with, at least like 50 or 60 different people in a matter of like 6 weeks.
And these are face-to-face
These
meetings
are
before
face-to-face
yeah.
meetings. Like, I was just like I had this list and I'm like, "I'm just gonna be aggressive." And I said, "So and so said to call," and everyone was, like, super nice and, very helpful, but, it's like the same thing, "Well, this is a tough business, and, I'll keep my ears open." It's like, what people still say to this day, and, but I needed to pay the bills. So I ended up, like I said, getting this job, writing these, promotional marketing campaigns, which again, I knew nothing about. I didn't realize that people did this for a living. In fact, when I got the job, one of my friends was like, "Oh, wait a minute, like, you're that guy." He's like, "'Cause" I'm like, "What do you mean?" He goes, "Well, I always wondered who wrote these things." I'm like, "There's, like, someone out there, like, writing, like, on the next Jeopardy, like, this I always wondered who did that." He's like, "Now you're that guy." I'm like, "Yeah, I guess you're right."
Yeah.
So I did that, and it was fun. Yeah, I was, I was good at it. I won some awards.
Mhm.
It was a lot of fun to do. It wasn't what I wanted to do per se, what I came out here to do, but I had a good time. Like everyone I worked with, we were all in like our 20s, and it was a lot of fun.
It's funny, like, how people come out here with an idea of what they wanna do, but then it's funny, like, how life takes them in a different
Yeah.
direction or careers take you in a or I even met a I did a chat a couple months ago with a guy who came out here and did exactly what he wanted to do and didn't like it. Like,
Right.
he came out here to act,
Right.
and he got a few jobs acting, but he was so put off or frustrated by the downtime between the jobs. Like, it's like, I wanna be an actor, like, I wanna work every month or every week or whatever, and then you realize, like, maybe you're lucky to do 30 days, and then 6 months later, you do another 30 days, and that's work.
Yeah.
And he was like, but so he ended up becoming like a social media star because he had more creative output that he wanted to get out, and now he's like on TikTok, and he's got millions of followers on
Amazing.
YouTube. Yeah. So it's funny, like, how social media has given actors who were bored too often a chance to.
No, and I think that's one of the pluses of social media. There's a lot of
Yeah.
but I think that's one of the pluses,
Mm.
is that you have all these outlets. Like there was, back then you just kind of, like you said, you waited around, maybe you did a play.
Mhm.
Even though a play in LA is, such a weird idea to a lot of people.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it was, yeah, I was just having fun. And then I did that. Yeah, I did that for about 6 years. Um, and halfway through that, I was like, "Oh, wait, there's other stuff I wanna do." I had one of those, like, "Wait a minute, what am I doing?" moments. And so I ended up producing a movie that my friends were making, like an indie film.
Hold on, you went from writing promos for television
Yeah.
shows to producing a movie.
Well, it's not as fancy as it sounds. It's not as fancy as it sounds. It was a guy I worked with who's, like, still a good friend of mine to this day, and he and his writing partner had written a movie, and, they were like, "Do you wanna, like, work on it with us?" I'm like, "Well, you guys are the writer-directors, like, what would I do?" And they're like, "Well, you could produce it." And I was like, "Okay." And then I was like, "Well, wait a minute, what does that entail?"
Yeah.
And it entailed, like, helping to raise money, casting, location, so, like, everything.
All the hard stuff.
All the hard stuff, yeah. And so we shot it actually, like, in December, and around this time of year, and, it did, went to a few festivals, it went to Slam Dance, and,
What was it
it
called?
was called Black Days.
I haven't seen that, no.
It's Sarah Silverman was in it.
You guys play Silverman?
Sarah Silverman in
Oh
one
my
scene,
god.
yeah.
Yeah. She's
And
the best. She's
right,
hilarious, yeah.
she's fantastic. And then, who else was in it? This woman, Shiva Rose, who, is an actor. And so, yeah, it was a learning experience for sure. Um, and after that, I was like, well, I want to do something else. Well, I still have my day job, of
Mhm.
course. So I decided to, I wrote a play because I'm like, I need to write a play. So I like wrote and directed, like a play. And then, I'm like, I want to do a short film. So I like wrote and directed a short film. So I was just doing, all these other things. And so much, I think, I'm not to get him out of my system just because I was like, I felt a little stagnant.
Mhm.
And I felt like, well, I came here, to be creative and do something, even though it's not sitcoms. I want to do more, than, on the next Jeopardy.
That's amazing though that you had the wherewithal that the job that you were in wasn't, ringing all the bells, right? And that's like, I need to get more creative, more output.
Right.
I have more story inside me that
Right.
people aren't letting me get out. And you found a way to do that yourself.
Right. Which I think is a good thing.
Mhm.
Again, I think, we're like creatives are just wired differently.
Mhm.
We need outlets, and we need to express ourselves in ways that other people don't. So I just thought to myself, you know what, I need to do other things. But it was also getting to the point where I was like, I want another career change. Like, I want to do something else. Like, I was kind of burnt out.
Mhm.
And I probably could have done what I was doing, forever till this day. But I want to do something else. And so, excuse me, I had a friend who was working at a production company on a show called It's a Miracle.
Oh, that's a famous show. Is it?
No, you're thinking of, yeah, I know what you're thinking of something else.
Oh.
Not Touched by an Angel, but it's something like that. But there's a connection to that. And so this was a show, like a cable show, and it was about people who've experienced miracles. It was like on the cusp of when reality was just starting. And so I ended up, I had a friend who worked on that. She goes, "Do you want to write like host copy, like wraparounds for the show?" And I was like, "Okay."
Mhm.
I'm like, what do I do? And I was like, "I never done that." So she showed me, and I did that as a side gig for several months.
Mhm.
And the host was Roma Downey, who was, she's married to Mark Burnett, but she's an actor, and she was on the show Touched by an Angel that was, like, I think popular in, like, the '90s or the 2000s or something like
Mark
that.
Burnett, the producer of Survivor?
Mark Burnett, the producer of Survivor, who I did a show with at some point later in my career. But, yeah, so I did this It's a Miracle. I was just writing wraparounds, like, on the weekends, and, my same friend, who I'm still friends with to this day, said to me, "They're looking for I know someone who's looking for a writer for Big Brother."
Oh, wow.
And I was like, "What's Big Brother?" Because I'd never seen it. I had a friend who watched it, but I wasn't really paying attention. So, and they were looking for someone basically to write host copy for Julie Chen, who was and still is the host. So I wrote like a spec, like host script. And then I think I met with the producers and got that gig. And then I was like, you know what? I'm like, this gig requires me to quit my job. So, like history repeating itself, I quit my job for a job that was only going to last 3 months.
Mhm.
And I was freaked out. It was a really tough decision for me.
The anxiety of that is unbelievable, and I think that's the biggest thing that people don't understand about, like, this industry in LA specifically is, like, when you get a job working on a show like Big Brother, it's not like a 20-year paycheck.
No,
It's like 3 months of really hard work, long hours or whatever, and then you're unemployed again.
right. We're all gig workers
Yeah.
in this business
Forever.
forever. I mean, that's what it is. And that took, for my family, and still to this day, I think that's like the hardest thing.
Yeah. What? You're
The
unemployed again?
Wait, what do you mean? Like, I don't understand. So yeah, so I did that job, and then I didn't know what was gonna happen after that. Like, I had no idea.
Mhm.
But it spiraled into other, like, writing gigs, like host copy gigs
Mhm.
as they call them. So I did Big Brother. I did a whole bunch of shows, that were produced by the BBC, but aired on, like, NBC here, like, writing for, like, Billy Bush, and, I did, like, an Oprah hosted, like, a reality show
Mhm.
briefly, and I wrote for that. So I was like, I had a good run writing all this, like, host copy stuff and working, with some pretty, like, famous people in the business.
Mhm. And did that tickle your creative itch? Like, were you getting what you thought you wanted to come to LA to do? Was that, like, the moment where you're like, "Yeah, this is feeling more my space," or were you, like, still, like, thinking, like, "I wanna be a head writer on a sitcom?"
I think the sitcom thing might have faded a little bit, maybe it was still in the back of my mind, but I really, I was enjoying it. It was different. Look, I mean, when I came here, there's no such thing as reality TV. I mean, I think there was, like, the real world, but nothing like it is, like, today.
Mhm.
So, it was definitely, I mean, I was enjoying it. It was different, it was chaotic. It was I loved being, being on a set, and I loved, the fast pace of doing, like, I did a lot of live shows, so, like, live to tape, and it was fun. It reminded me of doing theater.
Mhm.
Um,
With the studio
with
audience?
studio audience,
Mm.
and just, you had 60 minutes, and whatever happens, happens. Like, there's no going back, there's no editing, nothing. Like, what's out there is out there. And that was fun. And one of my favorite shows I did, with two people who are still, like, some of my best friends, they live in the UK, was a show called Grease, You're the One That I Want. And it was the search for the next Danny and Sandy.
Who are Danny and Sandy?
in the musical Grease.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Mhm,
And it was like doing it to me, it was like doing theater,
mhm.
like, all over again. So that was fun, and it was just a really good group of people, and I made some great friends, and yeah, so I was doing that for a while, and then I was like, "Well, am I burnt out on the host copy stuff?" But I could have done it. But then someone offered me, like, a story producing gig in reality TV, which is basically helping put together, like, once the footage is shot in the field, like, helping put that together in post.
Oh my god, that's gotta be tough.
It's tough.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because think about how many mistakes get made in the field, and then you have to fix them.
Yeah, but you know what? Here's the thing. I like puzzles,
Oh, that's the best puzzle.
and a lot of times you're handed this puzzle, and it's like,
It's a great
"This is what we shot. Here's this footage. Now make it work."
exactly.
And yeah, so I started doing that, and I did, like, a whole bunch of what you call, like, docusoaps,
Mhm.
like this show called Julian and Bill. I did a show with Denise Richards, and so just working, like, post-production, just, like, putting all this stuff together and working on the story and everything like that. And then I ended up working for 3 seasons. I became the co-executive producer. Joan and Melissa Rivers had a reality show, for 3 or 4 seasons.
I remember that, where
Yeah.
the mother-daughter team. Yeah, I remember that, yeah.
Yeah, so I ended up working, with them and working with Joan, which was just, like, so much fun,
Mhm.
like, so much fun.
Wow, so you went from, like, writing copy for television game shows to working with Joan Rivers for 3 years on her own reality show.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, that's a hell of a trajectory.
Yeah, no, it was great, and, like, growing up, like, my mom used to watch, Joan Rivers all the time, so it was kinda surreal, and, I mean, she was a legend,
Mhm.
and just, to be there and hear her stories and just, we would have, like, we'd Carol Burnett on once. We just had all these people, on the show as well, and it was, yeah, it was interesting. It definitely was interesting. It was a lot of fun too.
And how was it like executive producing, like, a reality TV show for 3 years? I mean, like, what was the day-to-day like?
It would depend. Some days you have crazy days. Some days you have, pretty mellow days. It was a lot of Joan had a very, very busy schedule because she toured all over, the world. And so we had to um, our production calendar had to, either follow her or work around that. So it was like puzzle pieces. Like, you would get like half an episode and then the other half wouldn't be done for like, a month or 2 months later. So it was like putting all these pieces together, putting something on hold. Um,
I'm curious about this actually, and maybe you can shed some light on this for the audience as
Sure.
well. Like, how hard is it to make a reality show with someone as big as Joan Rivers was in that day, or Kim Kardashian, or whatever, when they do have so many events and so many public appearances and so many other business ventures? And there you are, like, okay, I need to get 8 episodes with Joan Rivers for 60 minutes, 8 times, and it's got to be in one fucking location, but she's all flying everywhere all the time. She's doing all these things. So, like, what do you tell the broadcaster or the network or the studio when you're like, okay, well, we're doing this thing with Joan, but it's going to take us like 2 years to get 8 episodes out of it? Whereas they're like, no, we need eight episodes in 6 months.
Well, I think, I mean, Joan was very generous in terms of, and she had a very interesting life, so we were able to incorporate a lot of what she did.
That's the understatement of the
Yeah,
century.
exactly, right?
Yeah.
Very interesting life. We were able to incorporate a lot of what she did into the show, so that was amazing.
I don't remember anyone ever today being as eccentric as she was.
Yeah, I don't know, eccentric. I mean, I think she was bold.
Yeah.
Like, she was, I mean, look, she was a groundbreaker, for women and for comedians, and she's, she broke down barriers for so many people and said what was on her mind. I mean, we talked about, like, people, shows not being on today, or, movies not, getting greenlit today. Like, you know, I don't know if she would have survived, in this, climate today in terms of comedy because, some of her stuff
Mhm.
was, push the boundaries.
Absolutely.
But it was, yeah, we didn't, we worked around it, and I think the network understood it because, they had this legend who had a really interesting life. And again, Joan let us incorporate a lot of that into the show, which was great.
Mhm. Wow, and then so why did it end after 3 years?
Um, well, I
You were just fucking tired of it? No.
no, 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 no. Well, sadly, she passed away.
Oh,
So
that was it.
we had wrapped a season, and then we didn't know if there was gonna be another one, and then she had passed away. I think we wrapped in like late spring, and she passed away like I think that September.
Oh, man, that's
Yeah,
terrible when you work with someone for that long and then they
yeah,
just slip away like that.
it was surreal
Mhm.
for sure. And it was yeah, it was very odd,
Mhm.
very odd.
That's too bad. I mean, because that show probably coulda gone on. She coulda like, she had more yeah, more years left in her for sure.
Yeah, I mean, and she was a workhorse. Like she was the hardest working person that I've ever seen. I mean, she was, I think, 80 years old, 81 years old at the time, but she was always traveling and always doing gigs and always, she was she would sleep on airplanes. That he would schedule time and her sleep would be scheduled on the plane because that would be the only time she could sleep. And she would go back and forth to New York and LA. And it was just, yeah, but she's an incredible woman for sure.
Yeah. I remember reading something a long time ago saying, like, when she dies, she wants to just die on stage because that was, like, where she was happiest. Because like, sitting around dealing with, like, normal problems of normal people's lives, it
Yeah.
wasn't her thing. Like, she
Yeah.
loved performing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I think, I mean, she had, obviously a fantastic work ethic, and I think one of those things, she was one of those people that work kept her going. Like work was her life, and I think, and I, have known like relatives like this. Once they stop working, like they
Cut
kind of, yeah,
yeah.
kind of lost something,
Yeah.
and so that's what that's why I'm always like, I just, I don't know if I could ever retire because I'm like I like working too much.
Yeah.
And I like being, involved.
I also think, like, too, when you're artistic not autistic, artistic, like, when you love art, when you love storytelling, when you love creating, you really don't have to, like, retire, right? Like,
Right.
we're kind of already self-employed. These are things that, maybe I'll still be behind this mic at 80, right? Like,
Right.
these are things that we can keep doing well into
Yeah.
yeah, and there's no reason to retire because the moment you retire, I really believe, like, the moment you retire, you put one foot in the grave.
Yeah.
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 The cognitive decline of stopping work is unbelievable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, I just can't imagine, like, just sitting around and doing nothing all day or I mean, just golfing all day. I mean, it just doesn't interest me. And
Yeah.
fortunately, like, with, like you have a podcast and there's like we talk about TikTok and YouTube. It's like there's outlets now where we can just, be creative and keep going. And I think that's fantastic.
Yeah. So, how did you rebound from being an executive producer on Joan Rivers and then having her pass? Like, how do you even process that? Like,
Right.
because it's like you're probably pitching for another season, and maybe Joan was like, maybe, and then all of a sudden she maybe is ill, and then everything's quiet, and then she passes, and then you're like, what am I going to do for a job?
Well, fortunately, it was the same company that produced Joan, had other shows.
Okay.
So, but in a totally different genre. So I ended up, being the co-executive producer on a show called Flip or Flop.
I haven't seen that.
That is on or was, I should say, on HGTV, and it was about this couple who flipped houses.
Mm.
And it was one of these home improvement shows. It was wildly popular. And I had never worked on these shows ever. I watched them, a little bit, but I had never worked on any type of show like this. And I was curious when I was offered the gig because I was like, all right, I'm like, this is a genre I'm not familiar with, and I wanted to experience. I'd done like live shows, I'd done competition shows, I had done docu soaps, docu comedies, and now I'm gonna do like design shows and see what that's like.
Like I remember when that whole home improvement design, like that was huge for like a decade.
Yeah, it still is.
Really?
It's oh my god, it's massive. Like my whole family watches those shows.
Oh, really?
Yeah, like I mean, my brother called me a couple nights ago and was like, we're watching an episode of House Hunters right now. I'm like, oh, okay. I'm like, yay. I'm like, yay. So I ended up working on that show, and then I've done a whole bunch of other like design shows in between. And it's again, it's what I learned about all of these shows was that, whether it's like design and whether it's like, a competition show, whether it's like a docusoap, it's like, you're telling stories and you want to tell the best story possible. And I think, one of the reasons these HGTV shows and these design shows are so popular is because, yes, it's the storytelling because people love really good stories and really, concise stories. And also too that it's like there's something aspirational about it.
Hmm.
Like you see someone going out there, and renovating their house and you're like, all right, how are these people gonna do it? How they bought this house for like $500,000 and they're putting in like 100,000 into it. Like, what's gonna happen? So there's that element to it. And it's very relatable to a lot of people.
Yeah, and the people who are doing the renovating and the house flipping and stuff, like, they're like everyday people. They're not
Yeah.
like Brad Pitt and,
Yeah.
these, like, they're not superstars, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think they've become a lot of them have become like the Property Brothers. Um,
Oh, the New York real estate guys?
I think they're Canadian, aren't they?
I don't know,
Oh,
actually.
yeah, I think they are. But yeah, a lot of them have became celebrities through doing all these shows. So, and I also too, I like there's nothing like salacious about any of these shows, these design shows. Like it's all like, and I've never really had this, but I've never worked on a show where I feel like this feels dirty. I'm like, ugh. I'm like,
Fake drama, fake sensationalization.
just the content is just, I just feel like I'm polluting the minds
Mhm.
of like young adults or any adults. So, and I don't feel that way with a lot of these shows. Like I finished up like a long run on House Hunters, which is a big HGTV show. And, I loved it. I had a great time and it was, it's a very positive show and it's aspirational and it's one of these shows that it's probably of all the shows I did, next to I also worked on RuPaul's Drag Race, but next to RuPaul's Drag Race, the show I get asked about the most.
Mhm. Yeah, you're right. Like, it's like fixing up a home and selling it for more than you bought it is aspirational.
Right.
It gives people, like, hope that they can
Yeah,
make a better life for
and I think
themselves.
everyone can relate to it,
Yeah.
for sure.
But then how do people relate to RuPaul and her drag show?
Well, I think more people do than before, than
Maybe, yeah.
back in the day, when I worked on it. Because when I worked on it, and it was like the 2nd season, it was still kind of in its infancy, and it hadn't taken off to, like, the phenomenon that it is now.
Mhm,
I think, drag is more, uh people are more familiar with drag, I think, because of RuPaul,
mhm.
and, like, I have a family member, and someone I thought would never watch RuPaul's Drag Race, who's, like, obsessed with it and has been to, like, drag brunches and things like that. So it's definitely opened up, I think, some people's minds in that respect. And it's, again, it's telling, goes back to storytelling, telling really interesting stories, entertaining stories that people can, relate to on some level.
Mhm. From eccentric, exciting people who are living their best life.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And there's probably for some people, I'm not saying everyone wants to, to do drag, but there's some a little envy towards that and like kind of fascination, being like, oh my God, what a fantastic way to live your life.
Yeah, I think, like, when people do choose to go down this path of, like, alternative lifestyles, whatever that may be, whatever makes you happy, everything's fine. But you do feel like you're watching these people, like, live their freest, happiest life, and
Right.
there's, like, a little bit of envy. It's like,
Right.
I don't wanna put on a woman's dress, but I like that freedom and that energy you're
Right.
putting out right now,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
Yeah. No. And I think, yeah, I mean, I think, there's a lot of people out there who I think have like that artist, that creative inside of them that never comes out.
Mhm.
And I think we're fortunate that we have that. But for a lot of people that never comes out just because of circumstance or choice, and they're in a job or they're in a situation that, that they don't have the luxury that we do to express that. So when they see it in, whether it's on RuPaul's Drag Race or some other, medium, I think that sparks something in them.
Yeah, and there's, like, some guy in Kentucky who's like, "Oh, my wife won't let me do my drag brunches on Sunday," or
Yeah. I mean, there probably is. Yeah, 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 for sure.
that should be another reality TV show.
It's probably out there. There's so many shows out there I can't even keep track.
Yeah, I know America's pretty wild. They do have everything here. It's pretty fun.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, it's just so it's different in Canada?
No, I think There's a certain amount of TV in Canada that needs to be, like, programmed for Canadians, like, with Canadian producers, directors, and talent. So,
Okay.
like, we have this in Canada, and don't quote me, this might have changed, like, but, I mean, I haven't lived in Canada since I was 22, which was just a few years
Right,
ago.
of
Forget
course.
about the gray beard.
Last week.
But, I think that there's a certain amount of television that's broadcast in Canada that has to be Canadian,
Right.
but then the rest of it's all just stuff from the US. So we have, like, all the big competition games, all the big sitcoms, everything like that. So, I mean, the TV you watch here, apart from, like, the nightly news, is pretty much the exact same thing you get in Canada.
Got it.
Yeah, got it. But no, that's wild that you got to work on, like, so many completely different shows.
Yeah, and it's interesting, and I'm glad I had those different experiences,
Mm,
and it just even from, like, the beginning of, like, I was an acting major, then I worked in radio, and then I worked in, like, basically marketing,
mhm.
and then got into, like, all of this, like, unscripted reality stuff and just, like, worked on every genre across the board. I haven't done, like, true crime, which is really popular now,
Mhm.
and maybe I will, I don't know.
Only Murders in the Building.
Only Murders in the Building. I still have not watched that. I need to watch that.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, you'll love it.
It's another show that everyone's like, "You need to watch it." I'm like, "I will get to it."
Mhm. I grew up watching Steve Martin and Martin Short. I think, like, I was a little late for the first stage of Saturday Night Live.
Okay.
I was born in '78,
Okay.
so I missed, like, Chevy Chase, first year SNL.
Right.
But by the time, like, Steve Martin, Martin Short, Eugene Levy,
Right.
I was in it, and then by the time Sandler and Farley and those
Right,
guys,
right.
I was
You're
like,
like, "I'm here."
yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I'm committed. Yeah.
And then Three Amigos, holy shit, that blew my
Oh my
mind,
god,
and then
yeah.
Steve when anytime Steve Martin and Martin Short do anything together, I watch 100% of it.
Martin Short, did you ever see this show called Damages
I haven't.
with Glenn Close?
I love Glenn Close.
It's Glenn Close, and I'm totally blanking on her name. She was in Bridesmaids.
Melissa McCarthy?
No, she's Australian. Um
The slightly heavyset girl,
No, no, no,
no.
no, no, no. Oh my god, why am I blanking on her name? I'll think of it.
Okay.
But anyway, so it was I think it ran for 5 seasons, and Glenn Close is like this kind of like high-powered attorney. But Martin Short is on a season
Mhm.
of it in a completely dramatic role.
No comedy at all.
No comedy whatsoever.
I can't imagine.
And I think he got an Emmy nomination for it. And it's fascinating because there are no Martin Shortisms. Like
Really?
nothing. Like he's brilliant. He's
Amazing.
brilliant. Like I was like blown away.
Wow, he missed a whole, like, dramatic career.
He totally did. But I mean, I was like, this is like fantastic casting.
Damages.
Damages.
Okay.
Damages. Glenn Close.
I'm gonna look that up for sure. It's gotta be somewhere.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think I forget what it originally aired on, but it's out there.
Because I love that man. He's, Canadian as well, right? He was
Course,
fucking
yeah.
hilarious, yeah. But I loved it 'cause, Steve and, Martin, like, a two-man show where they traveled all around the United States, and then they had a Netflix special. Have you seen that? It was absolutely brilliant.
Yeah.
Listening to the both of them just go back and forth at each other.
Yeah, I know. I mean, I just and what's the who's the character that Martin Short does?
The Galicki or,
Right.
so yeah, he has
There's some of those that like were coming out, I think late last year or beginning of this year, and they're so hilarious. I mean, that man, the way that mind works.
yeah. There was a launch party in the summer, I wanna say, like, June or July here in LA. It was for Steve Martin's, documentary, the two-part doc
Right.
on Apple Plus, which is brilliant if anyone wants to check it out. But so Steve Martin's up there, on the stage, and, the director's there who's already won an Oscar as a documentary director, not for that, doc, but for a previous doc, and they're sitting up there talking about, like, what it was like following Steve around, for 2 years or whatever, how long they did, and going through the archive, and he's talking about all this stuff, and then Steve Martin's phone rings, and of course, it's Martin Short, and he picks it up, and he's on the mic, and you can hear Martin Short, he's like, "How's it going? How's it going?" And he's like, "Okay, guys, Martin wants to say hello," and everyone's like, "Hey, Martin!" So, like, they totally planned it, and the fact that they do that stuff even to this day is, like, so heartwarming.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah. No, I mean, yeah. Again, I Murders in the Building is a show I need to watch.
yeah,
So
absolutely. So, what did you like? I do find this interesting though that you rejected acting, like somewhere in your core,
Mhm.
you rejected acting, and then you became kind of like a factual reality TV
Right.
producer. Like you've
Right.
totally avoided like fiction scripted stuff.
Right, and then, like but peripherally, I have, like, all these friends who are actors, or, like, I have a lot of friends who are, like, casting directors, so, like, scripted casting directors. So, like, I have all these people around me who are somehow, like, connected to actors, but yes, I avoided it, and it's like, I have no regrets about that.
But it's almost like you've subconsciously chosen an entire career to avoid fictional acting and fictional screenplays and everything.
Probably. Yeah, I'm not sure probably. I mean, yeah, I've never thought about it like that, but
Yeah.
you're right.
Someone needs to unpack those University of Austin days.
Yeah, well, I have a therapy session tomorrow, so that's gonna come up. But no, yeah, I mean, look, again, like, like I said, I have friends who are actors, I respect them. I just don't have that when it comes to acting, I don't have that drive, and I never did. I just like having fun. I just like, being on stage. I really like going to the cast parties because they were just so much fun. Like, that was my thing. So, it's just like but to do it for a living, no.
But executive producing and co-executive producing, like doing the roles that you did, I mean, fun, yes, but holy shit, heavy lifting. Like you are managing every part of that TV show.
Yeah, I mean, there's obviously like there's help, like, it's a partnership with like,
Yeah.
people above me and people below me and, people on the same level. But yeah, I mean, they're it's not as easy as everyone thinks it is. Like, I have friends who work in other genres of unscripted and they're always like, I want to do like a design show. Like that just looks like so much fun and
And
just
you're like, I am.
they're like it's like a cakewalk. And I'm like, it's not a cakewalk. I'm like, none of this is a cakewalk.
None.
I don't care if it's scripted or unscripted or whatever it is. Radio, it doesn't matter. None of this is a cakewalk. Like it all takes like time and effort and talent
And tears.
and tears and late nights and staying up till like 5 o'clock in the morning. Like that's all part of it.
Mm.
And again, I think it goes back to, we're just, we're just wired differently. I remember having a conversation with my father once and he was just like, because wait, you have to work the weekend? And I was like,
Fuck that.
yeah. He goes, why do you need to work the weekend? I don't understand. And I was like, because that's part of my job.
Yeah.
That's what I do. Like most people I know work on the weekends to some extent, if in the entertainment business. So, but just a lot of people don't.
Get it.
You don't know it until you're in it.
I think that's really true. And you can probably agree or disagree with this statement. Like, it's better to spend 18 hours working on a set than to spend 5 hours behind a desk in a cubicle.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, but unless you like that, I mean, a lot of people do. Which no judgment on that. If you love it, then that's great. But it's like it did take me a while, I think, um, just, psychologically to be like, all right, this is the path I've chosen. Um, and there's nothing wrong with that
Hmm.
because I would get my mom would always be like, when do you think you'll get a real job? Like things like that. Like I would get that. I would get that question and I would be like, well, I have a job.
Mm.
I'm like, they're like, yeah, but it's going to end in 2 months. And then what happens? I'm like, then I get another job or I look for another job. And
Yeah.
it's
And then I have to stop going home for Thanksgiving.
exactly. But it just, when you're not wired like that and you're not in this, in this business, and that sounds really LA and I apologize. But when you're not in this business, it's hard to understand, I think.
Yeah. Well, we're all gypsies, right?
Yeah.
We're just like the new round of circus performers that traveled around the United States 100 years ago. We just go somewhere, we set up a tent, and then we put everything in the tent and then we make shit and then we move on.
Yeah. And it's like with everything now is gig worker, gig worker, gig worker, like all these, and it's like, that's not a new concept to us. It's like we've been gig working for years. It's not like, oh my God, this whole concept of being a gig worker now is just, I've never heard of it. It's like, yes, you have. I'm like, I have at least.
Writing rapper content for Jeopardy was the Uber driver of the day.
Exactly. That's what it was.
Yeah. That's wild. Well, you also had another job.
Yeah. No, yeah. I've had several jobs. And I'm also like now I'm doing a podcast too, like not hosting a podcast, but producing a podcast, like a business podcast on the side. So I've kind of gone back to my business roots when I did the business and jazz show. So
Well, yeah. I mean, you have so much radio experience. You must have a lot of ideas about how people can, get podcasts off the ground and stuff like that.
yeah, I mean, I think, one of them is having like a great idea.
Mm.
I mean, I think the market is, as I think it is in unscripted and scripted, it's cluttered right now, and having something that's like, like kind of like, a breakthrough, something a little different. I mean, sometimes, having a name helps, but we all can't have that.
No.
And so, yeah, I mean, I think a good idea a lot of times will get you places.
Yeah, I'm still looking for that.
You have a good, great idea here.
My great idea was just like, hey, I've traveled the world for like 25 years. I'm just going to come to LA and chat with people.
I love that.
Yeah.
What was your favorite? Where was your favorite place that you lived? Was it China? Was in
So like I've had a strange ride. Like I grew up just outside of Toronto and then was in the city for most of my teenage years. But and then I was a sportsman, right?
right?
I played basketball um since the age of like 6, and that culminated to me playing um basically at like the second highest amateur level in Canada, which was I played at the University of Toronto varsity, like Division 1. But then I wasn't able to go on to the national team, which would have been the highest amateur level. And then, but back then we didn't even have an NBA team. The Raptors, I think, the first season was like 97 or 98, which was when I was just getting into university. So, and I wasn't good enough to play professional. So you have like here you are, like 22 years old. You spent your whole life playing basketball, and then you're not allowed to play basketball anymore.
Right.
You know, and then it's like, well, what the fuck do you do with your life? And I had like quarter life crisis, like you did at 22. And then I was like, I'm just going to move to China because I took a few courses on China in university because I studied international politics and there were some options there. And I just found it to be totally different than everything I knew in Canada, even though we have a huge Chinese population in Canada, and we have a Chinatown in Toronto and everything like that. But real China is obviously different.
Wow.
So then, so I just picked up and kind of like went on this massive 3-month tour all around China. That was late 2020. No, sorry, that was late 2001, right after 9/11. Actually, it was when I made my trip. I think I flew like 7 or 8 days right after 9/11.
Okay.
And then,
Wow.
yeah, I did 3 months tour all around China, fell in love with it, came home for 2 weeks and then moved to Shanghai. And then, yeah, just tried to like figure out what my life would look like without basketball in it.
Right.
And it took time alone to figure that out. And I think that's one thing a lot of young people don't give themselves anymore. Like I think traveling by yourself for a month anywhere in the world
Yeah.
is incredibly enlightening, but you will learn more about yourself than the place you're traveling to.
Exactly.
And these times alone have always been very powerful because I've always like found my next step in that time alone. So when I was there, like, and also too, one thing is like when you play a sport for 15 years and you completely dedicate your life to it, you don't really grow up very well rounded. So I didn't have any hobbies or interests other than basketball.
Right.
And when I went to China, all of a sudden I realized, like, holy shit, I like writing.
Right.
Like, holy shit, I like photography. Like, I like different kinds of food. And I like talking to people who can't understand me and trying to like navigate like the 100 problems a day that I had to figure out to get food, to get housing, to get on the right train in the right direction. I had to, because I didn't speak any Chinese. So
Right.
I was traveling around China and I was like producing my own reality TV show of how to travel around China. And then I was like, oh my God, like this kind of storytelling is really wonderful. So then I started writing and doing photography for local magazines and then regional magazines. And then I got in with Time, Newsweek, Forbes, Fortune, New York Times. And I was a journalist.
Fantastic.
It was wild because that was like from 2002 to like 2012. And that was like the whole rise of China culminated with the Beijing Olympics in 2008, which was incredible. And then, and then as I was like reaching my heights as like a writer and a photographer, Lehman Brothers kicked in.
Mm-hmm.
And then that obviously was devastating for a lot of people. People lost their homes, finances, banks, things went crazy. But also too, the print publishing industry completely died.
Right.
And then that was when I decided like I need to make TV shows if I want to, continue to travel and meet interesting people and kind of like stay relevant in this space because I couldn't make a living as a photographer anymore. And then I started doing that and I self-funded my own show and then that built like, and then that was popular and the next one. And then I just started making them and then I built a whole career out of that. And that worked, that whole gig worked really well until COVID. And then COVID shut it down because by the time, like, you have to understand, like we were making a truly global television show. So with Extreme Treks on BBC Earth, which was the big show I was making, in one season we would film in Russia, Iceland, Laos, Papua New Guinea, Bolivia, Argentina, Jordan, and Uganda. So that's like one 8-episode season. So when COVID came around, like, and we couldn't travel anywhere, we couldn't do anything, like, and no one was like, I wasn't in the United States, I was in Turkey. I mentioned that to you before, and then, when I got out of Turkey, I managed to get into Europe, and I was traveling around in Europe trying to make some shows, and then we got locked down again in November 2020, and then I ended up in Dubai for, like, 2 years just waiting for travel to be free and easy because I
Right.
just thought, like, I didn't wanna make shows about Dubai because I don't really love it, like, I just lived there because it was kind of central and easy to get around, and but then you couldn't go anywhere else.
Yeah.
So it was like if you weren't making telling stories about what was around you, you were sitting on your hands, and
Right.
I sat on my hands for, like, 2 years.
Yeah. I think we all did
Yeah.
in some respects.
So that was crazy, but that was that kind of that quarter life crisis of not being able to continue being a basketball player pushed me out into the world, and then I had all these new interests and desires that came up from getting rid of basketball and finding something else in the world that kind of lit me on fire inside, and then that was really kind of how I developed that whole career, and that's kind of how the China story played out, and then I was incredibly lucky to leave China in 2019 before the COVID lockdowns.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I mean, it's, I always say to people, it's like, your life isn't going to work out the way you planned it. It just never is. And so it's like, it's like, listen to your story. It's like, it's just a series of reboots. It's
Mhm.
just like, changing directions and trying to figure out a way to, to like, you know, survive creatively and survive financially and stuff like that. And that's what I think it's definitely about in this business. I think it's true in any business. I think it's more so now the way the world is and the way like the job market is and the
Mm.
way people's careers are. It's like everyone's just reinventing themselves. You have to.
Yeah.
It's like you just can't be stagnant.
I think that's really important. Like I gave a talk actually a couple months ago, all about reinventing yourself because I feel like every 10 years my entire career gets completely turned upside down. And like I loved being a photographer. I would still be a photographer today if I could still make a living at it.
Right.
And by 2000, here's one for you. In 2008, partially because of the Beijing Olympics, there was a lot of news coverage about China that year. But in like 2008, I think I did something like 85 assignments, freelance assignments in 1 year, which is pretty unheard of. Like to work on multiple day stories more than once a week is a really rare thing
Right.
for a photographer to be able to do. And so I was doing that and then Lehman Brothers hits right after the Olympics, and then it takes people a little while to figure out like what's really going on. But by 2010, I did 14 assignments in 2010. So I lost like 71
Yeah.
actual jobs,
Right.
and those are well-paying jobs, at least they were back in the day. And then I'll tell you, my breaking point was great. I had a this was 2012. I had already made one TV show by then. I'd already seen the writing on the wall, but I was still doing the freelance stuff to make ends meet and stuff like that. I had already ridden the motorcycle around China. I did Tough Rides China with my brother. We set a Guinness World Record, made 6-part TV show. It was amazing.
Really?
Yeah. But I was still doing photography, but then the moment I was like, "I'm putting the cameras away forever," was I got a job offer from a really nice, newspaper that I had worked for over a decade, and they said, like, "Look, we need you to fly from Shanghai to Chengdu," which is about 2.5-hour flight, "and then we need you to get in a car. We'll arrange the guy to drive you. He knows where to go. He'll pick you up at the airport. He'll drive you 2, 3 hours out into the countryside. I need you to take a portrait of this guy. Something, not great had happened to him."
Right.
And that was part of the story. The writer had already been out there and done all the vetting. The story was like greenlit by the New York folks. And then I was supposed to go out there, get a portrait, back to the airport and back to Shanghai. But when you think of like the math of getting that flight and then that drive and then 1 or 2 hours there, getting a few good shots and then coming back to the airport and coming back to Shanghai, it was like a more than a 24-hour day.
Right.
So I was like, okay, guys, like I'm going to do one night at the Chengdu Airport Hotel Holiday Inn. Like it's $70.
Right.
And they wouldn't approve the hotel budget.
Of course not.
And I was like, wow, this industry's just died.
Right.
Unless you're doing war,
Right.
no one gives a fuck anymore. Like there's no like documentary journalism being done because it just doesn't pay. And all of my contemporaries are either fashion photographers or they went into academia.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of what I feel is happening now in this business because it's things have slowed dramatically. I mean, I think we're in a reset mode,
Hmm.
and I think hopefully 2025 will things will pick up again. But a lot of people I know, whether they're in scripted or unscripted, are trying to think what their next move is.
Yeah.
And for a lot of them, it's not it's not being in the business anymore and trying something else.
Yeah,
So
and I think that's leaving like, a lot of people are leaving LA
yeah, yeah,
because why would you be here if you're not in the business?
yeah.
Yeah.
And it's also it's weird. A lot of people are leaving LA, but then I know people who are coming back. Like I know people who left during like the height of the pandemic. They're like, I'm out of here. I can work from anywhere. And now like a few people are like, oh, I think I want to come back. And it's like, it's interesting. So yeah, I mean, look, I think if you're not in this business, for me at least, it's like I don't know, why you'd want to be here.
It's sunny every day.
It's son of but see, that drives me nuts. Okay, can I just tell you? I mean, this event. I grew up in Chicago, and it probably is similar to Toronto with the weather, where
You miss 4 seasons?
I'd miss four season. I still do.
Yeah.
Like especially around the holidays, especially around like Christmas. It's like I will never get you, and hopefully it won't be like this Christmas, but there was one Christmas here where it was like 90 degrees on Christmas Day. I will never get used to that. It's like, but it's 90 degrees. It's Christmas. I'm like, but it shouldn't be 90 degrees. Like, and we should have rainy days. I don't know. I still, so one thing I still miss, like our seasons.
The seasons are important, but, to be fair, like, last weekend, I was in Topanga, and I was, like, trekking up the side of this mountain, in shorts,
Right.
in early December, and then I got up to the top of this little mountain. I was looking out over the ocean, and then Malibu was down there, and I was like, "Still not bad."
No, I mean, look, it's beautiful. Like, it's a beautiful state. Like, it's just, yeah. I mean, and if you want the mountains, if you want, can drive to the mountains, if you want the water, so, but it's like, sometimes I'm like, today you walked outside and it could have been April
Mm,
or it could be December. Like, you never know.
and if it's at noontime, it's April, and if it's at 9 a.m., it's December,
Right. Exactly. Exactly. But no, like,
and then you need a jacket in the evening.
exactly. Exactly. But look, I think in general, I think LA gets a bad rap,
Mhm.
because I think there is a lot here, in terms of like culture, in terms of people, just in terms of, I think the food scene's really good. But me personally, I miss seasons. I want seasons. I want snow.
Well, you spent 4 years in Austin before it was, like, the place to be. Like,
Right.
what was it like being in Austin before it was this, like, hotspot?
I mean, it was great. It's still, it was a college town. I mean, definitely not like what it is now. And it was a really fun place to go to school. I mean, it had like everything. It had music. It had, even though I was a theater major and had like a whole theater department, it had like theater. It just, the food. Like I never had like Tex-Mex food, so the food was incredible. Like everything about it uh, was just unlike what I'd experienced growing up in the Midwest. But, yeah, I mean, it's like I haven't been back there in a long time, but, it just it someone told me it feels like LA now.
Oh,
That
really?
it's so crowded and so built up and, like, where I lived my senior year, someone told me, which was kind of like 15 minutes from campus, is now, like, considered the center of, like, the city because it's so built up. So, I mean, but yeah, it was, I always say it was, if there was a city to go to school in, it's Austin for sure.
I almost ended up in university in Texas too. I was almost went on a basketball scholarship to a university in Texas.
Oh, wow.
It didn't work out, but I ended up staying closer to home. But that would have been a lot of fun because it was a pretty good school, and I think playing ball in Texas would have been pretty epic.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
yeah.
Absolutely. Or, if you played football, that would have been even more epic.
That's dangerous.
Yeah, I know. Well, yeah, but I mean, Texas is a football
Yeah,
state.
absolutely. So, okay, so what? RuPaul's done. Like, what are you up to now? What's going on? What do you have going on now? What do you have coming up next year? Is there anything you can kind of talk about?
I mean, I'm still, I just wrapped my show, so I'm kind of taking like a little hiatus.
Hmm.
Doing this podcast called the Reboot Chronicles that I've been producing for a year and a half. So that's been fun. And I'm just trying to I think I'm like everyone else there. I'm trying to, to figure out what's next. And what's on the what's coming up and what's gonna happen in 2025. I think we're all I don't think I mean, I'm not on edge, but I think a lot of people are still on edge because we're just like, we're kind of we're in the unknown and we're not sure how all this is going to shake out.
Hmm.
I think as we talked about, there's so much content out there. And I think like the streamers and the networks are realizing that there's too much content. Like Like, we're producing all this content and no one's and not enough people are watching it.
Mhm.
So, I think they're pulling back, and I think that's gonna affect, what I work on, I think what you work on, what, like, my friends work on. So, it's an interesting time. So, I'm just kinda, like, sitting back and kind of, like, observing.
Mhm.
I do find when I have, like, when I have a hiatus like this, um, I like to do a lot of volunteer work, so I've been doing that,
Mhm.
which has been great.
That's amazing. That's
Yeah.
giving back's the best.
Yeah,
Yeah.
giving back's the best, and so I'm, like, volunteering with a pancreatic cancer charity, and I've been, um, a volunteer for 20 years with, Project Angel Food, which delivers meals to homebound people in Los Angeles. So, even though I'm not working right now, I'm trying to keep busy, so
Yeah. You gotta keep busy, right? Like, you can't not do anything. It drives you insane.
yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, and I'm not like it's funny, I used to be growing up, my parents could not wake me up 'cause, they would let me watch TV till, like, midnight. They were like, "You can do whatever you want." And so, then they would have this hard time getting me up, and then on the weekends, I would sleep through the cartoons and, like, sleep till, like, noon. But now I'm up, like, bright and early. I'm like, I could host, like, Good Morning America. I'm like, I'm up, like, that early in the morning. So, yeah, it's like I'm not someone who can just sit.
Mhm. Do you feel like, I mean, it sounds like you've been working in competition television, reality television now for, like, probably more
20
than
years, yeah.
20 years. Like, are you looking for a change, or are you looking for more of the same? Or, like, where's your feeling in the storytelling space as far as where you wanna be creatively?
I'm open. I mean, I'd be open to doing something in another space as
Mhm.
long as there's, like, a creative aspect to it.
Mhm.
And I think, but if someone, called me tomorrow and said, we have this reality show, like, I would totally do that. But I'm definitely open. I think I know I wanna keep being creative.
Mhm.
Like, I don't think I could do something that doesn't work that side of my brain. Like, I need that. Like, it's like life to me. So, yeah, I'm definitely open. Like, I mean, someone mentioned to me, a friend of mine mentioned, like, you should go into advertising. I don't know if I don't know about that, but, like, something where I can just, where I can tell good stories and, tell stories that make sense and tell stories that are somewhat impactful and that are entertaining, which I think is what it's all about.
Does the podcast tickle that itch?
A little bit,
Mhm.
a little bit. I mean, it's more producing. I mean, I don't host it, so, it's just more of those,
You got
the
a great radio voice, though.
do I?
Yeah, I think so.
Do? Really? Oh,
Yeah.
no, tell me that. Thank you. But it's more using those producing chops.
Mhm.
So, like, booking guests and guest ideas and stuff like that, and, like, promoting it and stuff like that. So, yeah, I mean, it's interesting. And again, I did the one of the reasons I wanted to do the podcast because that was another thing that I wanted to, like, kind of check off the list, because I'm like, everyone's doing a podcast now, and they're super popular, and I want to know what that world is like. So,
Welcome to my podcast.
welcome to your podcast, and here I am.
It's funny, like, um, I basically started doing this because I didn't know anyone in LA,
Right.
and I really wanted to, like, build a network and meet some really wonderful people. And, like, I think before COVID and, 2019 and earlier, I would fly into LA from some godforsaken part of the world, crash at some nice hotel for 3, 4 nights, go to 3 or 4 meetings a day, have drinks with some friends, get hungover, wake up the next day, go to more meetings. Nothing would get done. No, nothing really came of it. But I was always kind of coming back, trying to figure out, because I made all my shows independently,
Right.
and that started with the first one. Like, we had to fund it, and then we kind of snowballed that into making independent television production, which no one does really. People make independent film and documentaries and stuff like that, but they don't, like, go out and make 8 episodes of something independently. But I kind of figured out how to do it, figured out how to raise the money. So I've always been kind of working independently. So then I would come to LA all the time and be like, okay, guys, like, I'm doing this show. We've won some awards. The quality is pretty good. Like, can I work with you and we can make this, like, a little bigger? And,
Right.
like, I can get it onto, your streaming platform or your broadcast platform, and whatever. And none of it ever worked. And I was just like, and then I was like, okay, you know what? Like, if I come to LA now and I want to live here, I really need to meet some people and, like, really connect with them, right?
Yeah.
And instead of, like, ringing you up on LinkedIn or calling you and be like, hey, let's get a coffee. I was like, let's come here. Like, let's make this the place where we just have
That's a
chats and meet
terrific
everyone.
idea. No, that's perfect.
Yeah.
And LA's a really it's a hard city to meet people in, I think, because it's such a car culture.
Yeah.
And, it's not like New York or even Toronto where, where everyone's on the street. Like, I can walk down Sunset Boulevard and I can be the only one on the street, So I think that's a great idea.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's been great because people have been super, responsive, and everyone
Right.
wants to come in and talk about their latest project or talk about themselves or talk about what's been going on. I pepper in a little bit about myself along the way, but you really connect with people.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's what has always been missing in my LA experiences. And I thought like that would be the way to kind of tackle that.
Yeah. No, and I think it's so important. I
Mhm.
think just well, just to have connection with people, especially these days,
Mm.
because it's like I feel like I don't s I mean, I still don't there's a lot of people who I'm friends with that I don't see enough in person,
Mhm.
we're either messaging or whatnot, and so
And they're in the same city.
and they're in the same city.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think that's a problem. So I think, you know this is a great idea. Like,
Yeah.
I really, yeah, kudos to you, man.
Well, my favorite thing is like when friends want to catch up, I invite them onto the podcast.
But that's perfect.
And
So Thanksgiving dinner or Christmas dinner will be on the podcast?
all right here.
Okay, good.
And then when young like filmmakers or storytellers like write me and they're like, "Oh, I want to talk to you. Like, do you have time to talk about like how you got started in the business and like
Right.
your?" I was like, "Yeah, come on the podcast."
And do they? Like,
Absolutely. Yeah.
have you ever someone said no?
Um, a few people have said no. So all the young people they
Right.
definitely want it. Like I had this great kid on a couple months ago. His name's Ollie. He's at USC. He's just starting out in the business. Actually, he just got an internship a couple weeks ago with CBS. We were chatting the other day. I was like, good for you. It's a great start. I know it's not what you want to do long term, but at least you're in the system and you can figure out now
Right.
how to like navigate. And yeah, they just come on and we talk about their insecurities. We talk about where they think they can go. They ask me questions. And I just feel like there's got to be 100 Ollies out there or 1,000 Ollies out there who are 23 or 22 and they don't know what's going on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, and I think that's what you have to do. Like, I mean, like
You
what
got to pay it forward. If you've
yeah.
had any success and you've done anything where you've done well off the eyeballs of other people, you've
Yeah.
got to give something back to the next
Yeah.
generation.
When I moved here and I was talking about, I had that list of people and I just met with all those people for like weeks and weeks and weeks. Like, it was so helpful because I got so many different perspectives, one thing led to another and led to another and led to another. And you have to do that. I can't imagine not doing that. Like, I mean, I'll get contacted too by people and I'm like, I'm always willing to chat because I know what it's like to be in that position,
Yeah.
you know?
Except I make them make
Make
content
the
with content
Yeah.
with me.
Yeah. No. I don't do that, but yeah, I admire that.
That's your next podcast.
That's my next right, exactly.
So, I mean, okay, you miss the Four Seasons, but do you get back home often? Like, do you miss like the Midwest? I mean, it was obviously a big part of you growing up because I think you also went to Texas, you didn't go to New York, you didn't go to LA right after school. Like you stayed in that Midwestern kind of zone. Like, do you miss that lifestyle?
Um, I miss my family for sure. Uh, you know what I miss? I miss like and I did like after college, I lived in the city for a couple years. I miss like more of an urban atmosphere, I think,
Hmm.
in terms of like
High-rise buildings.
high-rise
Yeah.
buildings, train like we talked about, like trains and buses and, stuff like that. And then there's like I said, there's parts of LA that have that. Um, but, I don't know if I could ever live in Chicago again.
Hmm.
I think it just might be a little weird because 'cause I've been gone for so long. Uh, but I go back once or twice a year, and I love visiting people and, the food's good.
Yeah.
Food's really good. The pizza's amazing.
Mm.
So,
The pizza is famous.
pizza's famous and rightly so.
I think the last time I was in Chicago was I went to a Bulls basketball game
Okay.
with my brother and a few of his friends in 2008.
Okay. A while ago. Yeah.
Been a while.
Yeah.
Yeah. But no, it was a fun time. But yeah, Chicago's always been such like an important city, and it's too bad like the entertainment industry is so concentrated here.
Yeah, I feel the same way. I love New York as
Mm.
well. And I think New York has more of like an entertainment scene, so to speak, than Chicago.
Mhm.
But yeah, and when I was choosing where to move, when I was leaving Chicago, New York actually was in play.
Mhm.
Because I had friends in New York, and they were like, "Come to New York, come to New York, be with us, be with us." And LA just made more sense because again, I was coming out here to write sitcoms,
Mhm.
and there were no opportunities for sitcom writers in New York.
No, they're all here, yeah.
They're all here.
Yeah.
So
Even if they film in New York,
exactly, which I don't know if any of them do anymore.
all the Seinfeld stuff was shot out here, and that's probably the most famous, like, New Yorkie
Yeah,
sitcom you
and
could
like
ever imagine.
Friends too. Like Friends was out here too.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, LA has it's its own beast in
Mhm.
many ways, like every city. But um, for Chicago, when I was back there like in October, and I was downtown for like a day, and I was like, oh my god, this is amazing. Like just like the city aspect of it all. That's what I love.
The tough thing for me was winters on the Great Lakes are harsh.
Yeah, yeah, I know.
That wind.
Yeah, it's awful. And I did 10 days. Actually, I did 6 days in upstate New York, and then 8 days or 10 days in New York City last Christmas. So, and I was staying at a friend's apartment who was out of town, and it was cold.
Mhm.
It was so cold, and you forget, like, I would leave the apartment, and I wasn't working or anything, so I was on Christmas break, so but you have to leave with all this stuff, like, you have to have your gloves and everything, and then it's like, "Well, wait, what if I don't come back here later?" Like, I have to bring, like, just all this stuff, so you have this, like, backpack, and it just was so cold,
Mhm.
um, and I loved it, but towards the end of the trip, I was like, "I can't with this this wind and this cold," and like, the walking, and it just was yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's, it's always I think a lot of cities get romanticized,
Yeah.
for sure,
Home
especially being
Alone
like
at
that.
Christmas.
Home Alone well, yeah, exactly. Like, that wasn't real? That seems really real.
I have this vest, this jacket, without sleeves, right? Proper vest. And it has like a button on the chest
Right.
and it's got like 3 settings. And you take like a little USB phone charger
Mhm.
and there's a place in the jacket you plug in your USB phone charger and then it heats your jacket. And
Really?
yeah,
Oh my god, I want that.
and it's fantastic. So, like, I was in, I was ba like, I used to go to I love Russia. I know you can't say that these days because it's not politically correct, but obviously, the regime there,
Really a beautiful country,
incredible.
yeah.
Like, I filmed there a few times. I used to go there, when I had before the war when it was fashionable. But Moscow, St. Petersburg, two of the greatest cities really around. And so I got this jacket, this vest thing, and I went to Moscow in January. Now, Moscow in January is absolutely beautiful. Like
Right.
it's almost like New York, the way they light it up with the Christmas lights and everything like that. It's really special. And then, in Red Square, you can go ice skating and stuff like that. Well, people are really going to kill me for how much I'm loving up Moscow these days. But it was such like a wonderful time. But that vest kept me warm. So
Yeah.
next time you go to New York, I'll send you the link.
But it's
Yeah, yeah.
okay.
And it takes that knife's edge out of the wind.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I feel like I've been here for so long, and
LA makes you so soft.
it makes me so soft. I realize that, but I was like, because 'cause I'm going there, I'm like, "I'll be fine." I grew up in Chicago, it's like I stood out in the waiting for a bus in, like, 20-degree weather, I'll be fine, and then you get there and you're like, "Oh my god, I need a hot chocolate, like, right now."
Do you think you would enjoy taking all of this executive producing, writing skills that you've built up over this competition space and reality TV space? Do you think that those skills that you've created and perfected over the years would translate well into like scripted features?
Um,
And does that interest you at all?
Possibly.
No.
I haven't really thought about it. It doesn't really interest me.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, I don't know. I
Mm.
mean, that's a good question. I've never thought about it. I feel like scripted is just something I don't wanna get into, and I don't know why. I don't have a specific reason why, but, yeah, it just doesn't interest me. I maybe 20 years ago, yes, I think I still had that.
Well, you did your friend's film, right?
I did my
Yeah.
friend's film,
Right.
and I did my short film. My friend's film was hard. It was really and I was like, "I never wanna do this type of thing again,"
Hmm.
because, it just it caused some friction between me and my Me and one of my friends.
Best way to never be friends with people again?
So
Yeah.
it's like it was a little like, I didn't go to film school, so I was felt like I was getting like like a lesson in, like what it was like to go to film school.
Mhm.
But it's hard, especially when you're doing like an independent movie and, you're like craft services and, casting director and, and fundraiser and you're doing everything.
Yeah.
So that's but yeah, so I don't, I, I think like my producing skills like definitely have like that project management
Mhm.
vibe to them for sure. But I'm not sure if scripted is where I'd want to take them.
Okay. Interesting. No, it's great because like again, I don't think people in the audience understand how much of a difference there is between working on a scripted feature and working on a competition or reality based
Yeah.
TV. They're just like, oh, producers are just producers.
No.
No.
No. And there's like people don't understand. Like I always have to explain what I do because no one know. I mean, and what I do on like an unscripted show is different than what you do on like a movie, and what I do on, like, House Hunters is different than what I did on, like, Big Brother, so it's just, you know, it's people don't get it a
No.
lot of times, which I don't blame them because I wouldn't get it if I wasn't in this business.
It's true. It takes a while to figure
Yeah,
shit out.
exactly, and I'm still figuring it out, so,
What's your dream scenario for 2025? What's the one thing you want to really do?
uh, well, I think I'm going on a family trip to Italy, so I'm really looking forward to that. I have not been to Italy.
Okay, that sounds fun.
Yeah, so that'll be fun, so that's, like, personal-wise.
Mhm.
Dream-wise, I think, I just I wanna So I wanna find something that kind of, is both challenging and, comforting and fulfilling
Mm.
all at the same time, and I know that's, like, a big order,
That's a big ask.
um, but I would love and I haven't look, we've all worked on projects that can be a nightmare,
Mhm.
and I haven't had one of those in a long time. Um, I really don't want one of those.
So you think you're due and you have to be a little careful?
I have to be a little careful. I'm not looking for a shit show.
Right.
And I want something that, where I respect everyone and people respect me and it's somehow artistically fulfilling if that's even possible.
Spoken like an industry vet. Like
I
you've been doing this for 20 years. You don't want to walk into someone else's mess.
Yeah, I don't, and again, I've done that and sometimes you walk into a mess and it's like it's a good mess.
Mm.
It's like, "All right, I can figure this out." But sometimes you're just like you walk in and you're like, "What happened here?" I'm
It's
like,
all about the people.
"Yeah, no, it definitely is."
Yeah, like if you walk
Absolutely.
into a shit show and everyone has a good attitude and they're willing to do the work, they just don't know what they're doing,
Yeah.
and you can walk in and like save them.
Yeah.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
You feel like you're useful, everyone appreciates everyone else, and you're really getting everything back on track.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
But when you walk into a shit show and everyone's shitty, that's the worst.
Yeah, no, like, I have a friend and he's not in the industry at all, and he's starting a new job, and he knows someone who works at this company, and they're like, "This is a disaster, you don't wanna be here, it's awful, I you shouldn't take this job," and he's in a position where he needs to take the job, and I'm just like, well, first of all, I'm like, "Tune this person out." I'm like, "That's not helpful to you," and I'm sure there are other people there who aren't negative,
Hmm.
It's like, find the people who aren't negative and stay away from the ones that don't. Because yeah, you're right. Like if you're in a situation where everyone is just in a bad place,
Yeah.
it's like you've lost. You've already lost like walking in there. So attitude definitely helps. And I know like when I'm looking for people on, shows when I'm, staffing a show, I'm like, I want to find people that I can work with, who want to be here and who aren't just like, checking a box off. If they're, I need to make money and I don't care what I do, but it's like, you really, but a lot of times people do that, but it's like, you really need a good attitude and it's easier said than done. But I think it's half the battle in this business. Cause if you go into a situation and you're just, miserable walking in, it's like you've lost and everyone else around you has lost.
Yeah. That's a good way to put it.
Yeah,
Yeah. Proper wisdom there.
exactly.
If you ever had to leave LA, where would you go?
Oof.
Italy, naturally.
Of course. I love New York.
Mhm.
I don't know if I could do New York now.
Mhm.
I think at 25 it would have been a lot of fun. Um, I love London.
Mhm.
I would definitely, in a dream world, go to London.
Oh, London, it gets even less sunlight than New York.
I know, but that's amazing. I again, I like the idea of that. And you know what? I love Amsterdam. I think Amsterdam is,
The gem of Europe.
the gem of Europe. I think it's, I mean, breathtaking. I think the people are friendly. I love everything about it. I love seeing 90-year-old people riding bikes, speeding through the streets. So any of those cities, it would have to be a city. I don't think I couldn't go to Palm Springs and call it a day.
No, that's where
No.
my dad lives.
Oh, he does?
Yeah, he moved out there like a decade and a half ago. Yeah, he's one of those like retired
And
golfer
he
guys.
he loves it?
Um, he loves it, but the summers are tough. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I can't. I'm one of those, I will go for 2 days and it's fine, but, I have friends who have bought places there and
Mhm.
friends who are like, "This is where I'm gonna retire," and I'm like, I can't do 106 degrees there. I once went there, on 4th of July weekend with some friends, and
July's tough.
It was awful, and it was like 120 at, like, 8 o'clock at night, and I had, the Trader Joe's, bags,
Hmm.
the recycling bags, and they melted in my car. Like, I was like, "This is place is" like, and again, to each their own, but it's too hot for me. I can't deal with, like, that heat.
One of the things that was really important for me when I looked at where I wanted to live and coming out to LA, obviously, the entertainment industry was part of it, but it's been a while since I like lived in a place where I could like live for 12 months a year.
Right.
And LA is just, again, it's so nice in the spring and the summer and the fall and the winter. Like it's all pretty kind of the same. It gets a little hot in August, maybe a little in September,
September,
but
yeah,
the
yeah.
rest is kind of done. But like in Dubai, when I was living there, like the winters were amazing,
Right.
but then the summers were just like Palm Springs. But the difference is because I visit my dad quite often in the summer in Palm Springs. Like in Palm Springs, you have like a real dry heat, so it's like
Right.
120 with like zero humidity.
Right.
But in the Middle East, it's like 120 with like 100% humidity. And you just walk outside and you feel like you're breathing water.
Yeah.
And it's just disgusting. And all the sand gets stuck in the humidity in the air 'cause you
Ugh.
still have the wind.
Yeah.
And so from like May till October, you just couldn't live there.
Right.
So then I was spending my summers in Europe and then going back to Dubai, trying to work in between. And I just lost track of like where I was living.
Right.
And then, but it's so nice to like have a base here where you can actually live comfortably for 12 months a year. And that's so rare.
Right. No,
Yeah.
absolutely, and I don't understand, people who stay in people who stay in Palm Springs over the summer. I
Mhm.
think it's just, I mean, you can't leave your house,
No,
and it's not for me.
no.
Again, I need, like, if I were to move, it would have to be somewhere that has seasons. I say that then, like, cut to me being, like, miserable in, like, January. L
January's tough.
like, I have friends who they're back, in Massachusetts for 6 months,
Mhm.
staying with their parents, and, they're really excited about it. They're like, "We can't wait," and they're there now, and it's Christmas, and there's snow, and, like, hot chocolate, everything like that, and one of them was like, "But, yeah, talk to me in February."
Yeah.
I'm like, "Okay." Yeah,
Yeah.
I get it, I remember.
Yeah. When you're doing a bottle of Jack a day just to get through the
Exactly.
depression.
And the snow just doesn't stop, or even, like, Chicago, I mean, it would be, like, May,
Yeah.
and it would be snowing, and you'd just be like, but again, it's all I knew, so I was like, "Okay." Now I don't know, like, how I would feel about that, but
Yeah.
I'm
I've
conflicted, as you can tell, about this whole season thing.
I think I could live anywhere in the United States except for Florida because I hate the humidity,
Mhm.
and that whole, like, Southeast, like, I can't do humidity anymore.
Right.
And Seattle because it just rains too much.
Seattle, my sister lived in Seattle. Both
Yeah.
my sisters, actually. One of them just moved there, or moved to upstate New York a couple years ago.
Mhm.
But, yeah, it's a little gloomy all the time,
Mhm.
but when it's sunny, it's beautiful. But I think Seattle's an interesting place.
Yeah.
Like, I think it can be challenging, and I've had several friends who moved there and left just because they couldn't take the lack of sun.
Yeah.
Or, like, it's killing me. Like, my one friend said he went to, like, the doctor, and they're like, at the lowest vitamin D level. Like, the
Yeah.
doctor had seen, it's like, "Well, what do you want from me?" I'm like, "I live in Seattle.
Yeah. Give me a shot.
Yeah, give me a shot, give me a pill." I'm like, "I'll take it."
Oh, man, that's good. Well, look, I mean, you feeling good or anything we didn't touch or
No, man,
anything?
this was great.
Yeah?
No, I feel like we talked about everything. I'm just like super, again, it's like going out for coffee, but with like cameras and microphones.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
just catching up with a new friend and getting to meet, someone who's in the business and someone who can inspire me and the audience as well. It's wonderful.
I appreciate it, man. I really do.
I really am glad you came out today. I really appreciate I'm so glad that we live so close together,
I
actually.
know, right? I could walk here. It's perfect.
It's beautiful.
Very on LA.
I think you might actually be the only guest who's walked here.
Well, I should get some type of like t-shirt or badge or something.
We'll figure it out.
Okay. Okay.
But now here we go up to the fourth, and now people can see we're in the same room
Okay.
because we don't do Zoom calls.
Oh, we don't do Zoom. Okay.
Matthew, great to meet you.
Great meeting you, Ryan.
Thank you so much for coming by.
Thank you.
And this is our only production quality. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Fade to black. And we're out.
Cool.
Yeah. That's all right.